I'd like to welcome Joseph Lapin. He is the founder of Campbell Learn, a higher education marketing agency and consulting firm. Campbell Learn focuses on transforming the student journey through personalized, story-driven strategies to increase enrollments, boost engagement, and reduce melt in higher education institutions. Joseph has over 12 years of experience in higher education marketing, working with some of the most prestigious institutions, leading strategies that drive enrollment, growth, and helping universities stand out in crowded markets. He describes his journey in higher education marketing as unexpected. His professor and author, Les Sandiford, introduced him to Joseph Campbell's transformative hero's journey, reshaping his understanding of narrative and his power to drive meaningful change. Welcome, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Darshan. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
So let's start with your journey. What are the aha moments that have led you to where you are now?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this, and there's a lot of aha moments for me. I think it's when you think about someone's journey, it's, really messy and confusing. And along the way, you find these, different pockets. And I would say that before I get into the real aha moment about, Joseph Campbell, and my MFA in creative writing, my grandfather meant the world to me. And when I was younger, he would always talk to me about the power of education, the power of kindness. And he stressed that, very much consistently, that if you want to do something special in your life, you need education. I mean, he was, growing up in New York, trying to find a way to get through, and he took accounting classes at night and then ended up working and becoming a very successful, accountant finance person at a company called Continental Can. And he swears he could only do that by going at night, working hard during the day, trying to be there for his family. And, that really was an aha moment once it clicked in for me was, okay, education is powerful. Kindness is powerful. But for me in my journey, I think the aha moment came after graduate school. I write and publish short stories, and I've published poetry. And I'm still, my end goal in life is to have a business that's is very successful, but also have books on the shelf. And when I was in graduate school, just really struggling during my MFA in creative writing to figure out how to tell a story. My professors were just ripping me up. My classmates were ripping me up, all in a very productive way. But the art of storytelling was more difficult than I thought. And I remember one summer at FIU, I was just, trying to figure it out, writing. And my professor sent this book. It was actually a Chris Vogler book that used Joseph Campbell as a framework. And that was about how to really, create movies. But the concept was there, and then I eventually read Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. But that aha moment came for me was, oh, wait, storytelling. That's not just about characters and, it is actually, when you do it right, tapping into something very primitive, when humans were sitting around the fireplace, and that when you do it right, it connects to something that's in all of our DNA. No matter what language you speak, no matter what culture you're from, no matter what country you live in, there is the hero's journey as a part of your life. And that hero's journey, it was something that was a call to adventure, that in your ordinary world, no matter what you were doing, if there was a call to adventure, something that shook you out of your ordinary days. And Darshan, I think that is the aha moment. I mean, everything from, the call to adventure to James Joyce's Epiphanies, this was baked in stories, right? This realization that the ordinary world I'm living in, I have to go out on a quest. I have to go out and pursue something that I want. And of course, the hero's journey is more complicated and nuanced, and it has all of these different angles. But at the core of great storytelling is the recognition of a character who wants something, and they go on a journey to accomplish that, and it becomes bigger than themselves. So that aha moment for me in storytelling was really a profound moment for all things that I did, from marketing to, and in Darshan, what was really funny is at that time, I'm kind of from a town, it's like a former mill town in Massachusetts. I grew up with so many working class folks. And when I was thinking about storytelling, how to make a career out of it, I often say, what the heck am I doing? I mean, I'm 23. I'm in an MFA in creative writing. The world is changing. And I'm like, what am I doing telling stories? How can this be meaningful for, money or career or even the community I'm in? And that same professor, Les, was like, what do you mean? Like, even back in the day when there were communities and it was a hunting community, you needed storytellers as a part of society. And so it didn't take me until later when I joined a company called Cirque Interactive to realize that, okay, it's not just art, but storytelling is a needed skill set in this world. So there's so many aha moments there. There's so many, shoots to that journey we can go down. But, really it's about understanding the framework of storytelling and how it connects to us on a primitive level emotionally. And that's how you sometimes have to talk to people rather than logically. And then the value of storytelling and the value of education. Those things have been aha moments for me consistently, again and again and again. And I'm very grateful for those learnings.
It's very interesting. So what you're talking about is something that's been proven throughout time, right? And things that have been used in literature, film, even marketing. I'm curious, a lot of people talk about storytelling, but what would you say are the three things most people misunderstand or get wrong about storytelling?
A story, and I think people get this wrong a lot, there has to be something that an individual wants. First and foremost, that's the difference between an anecdote and a story. Oh, I went to the grocery store and I did this and I did that and I did this. There's this and conversation. That's when people get so bored. There's no cause and effect. There's no desire in the character. There's nothing that's propelling them forward. So I think that's really key is when you watch really great movies, when you read really great stories. Now, there are people who break the rules. I learned about this in literature, when I was reading about it. But if you want to connect to people, you really want to drive people, there has to be a want, and we have to watch someone, try to accomplish that. But let's take that to marketing. I think that a lot of people in marketing think, especially performance marketers, and I've had some really great relationships. I can think of one of my mentors, John Van Fleet, who is a CMO. We've talked about this all the time. He's helped me understand direct response and digital marketing. And we've often talked about the power of branding and storytelling in that and really had great conversations and did some great work together. But that second thing that I would say that people really miss is that it's performative when you do it right, but also it's about not your brand. You're not telling your story's brand always. You can, and of course that's important, but I think the most compelling storytelling happens when you're putting, especially in higher education marketing, the student at the center of that story. So you're understanding them on a very deep level before you do any marketing, before you do any storytelling. What do they want? Let me give you a really good example. We worked with Northwestern University's MLS, Master's in Law program. And what was amazing about that is, okay, who's the audience for a Master's in Law program? Well, you think it'd be lawyers. Wrong. It's not lawyers. I mean, yes, lawyers do go to this program, but this Northwestern program was about a STEM-focused Master's in Law program that actually helped people who needed understanding of the law to accomplish goals. So what we did is we said, okay, who are these people? What do they want? So take someone who works in biotech. They might be working on the bench, developing, innovations and products, but they need a skill set to understand the law to get that beyond the bench. Like, how do they develop that? Someone working in fintech, working on, hey, I want to develop some sort of, I'm just thinking out loud. I want to create a crypto, a meme coin or whatever it is. I want to understand the law to make sure that I'm protecting myself and moving this forward. So you're developing all of these individual customer segments, deeply understanding their wants and telling a story. So when you think about that hero's journey, that call to adventure, that aha moment for them is, oh, I always wanted this skill. I wanted to accomplish this. Now I see a story of a university program, a master's degree, whatever it is, and I'm going to take that leap and I'm going to go. So yes, it's about brand storytelling, but I think more importantly, it's about individual storytelling in their journey and making them see how your product gets them to that goal and gets them to that bigger part and gets that's some transformation. You might not sit e-commerce when you're selling widgets, do that, but I don't agree with that either. I think this goes for everything, but especially in higher education, this is important. And then third piece, performance. Storytelling is not fluff. It is not. It is, especially in social advertising, you know, you need engagement, you need comments. And I'll never forget this. We did this campaign called the Raise Your Hand campaign for American Universities Education. And we created this campaign because they had all these different programs from masters in teaching, masters in special education, masters in policy, doctor, all these programs. And what we realized is that, okay, you're going to raise your hand to join these programs, not just for money's sake, but you're joining a mission to improve the school systems so that the school systems are fulfilling the promise of America, which is equality, equity. And so that was the Raise Your Hand campaign. There's folks in front of DC raising their hand saying, I'm joining this cause. And the most amazing thing happened. You saw literally in ads, these are ads in social memes, meme after meme of someone raising their hand saying, I'm ready. And of course, that drops your cost. That creates connection. Even on your landing pages, that reduces your improves your conversion rates. Like if you do this right and you develop that emotional connection, you're improving your lifetime value. Is that, of course, yes, you need really smart digital marketers to run campaigns, but if you're not blending that with storytelling, you're wasting money.
Interesting. So I think a good story, the hero needs to want something. But my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, you also need conflict. So how do you introduce that when you're doing marketing, or let's say even for higher education?
Yeah, it's a great question. So conflict is created in storytelling when someone wants something and something gets in their way. It's that simple. And I think that a lot of people will think about conflict and storytelling as, oh, I need to slay a dragon. Now, Huggy Rao at Stanford University talks about this concept of when you're developing a mission for businesses, you can create two different versions: slaying a dragon, like beating a competitor, or saving the princess. And that's, he uses that. It's like, hey, we're going on a mission to make an impact in something. I love how Huggy Rao and Bob Sutton as well, they create that paradigm, they create that mission for business. But I think when you're thinking about storytelling, and I think that's the way a lot of people think about it, Mario trying to save the princess, Luke Skywalker trying to overthrow the evil empire. Conflict is massive. It's massive. But Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite authors, he specifically said, and this always stuck with me, conflict can be a character who wants something, something gets in their way. It could be as simple as, hey, there's a glass of water on the other side of the room and something gets in the way. I mean, Breaking Bad did this with capturing a fly in their meth lab. It's just, so when you think about that and you simplify conflict, it makes it more accessible, and I think it makes it more real and human. So take for higher education. The want could be something as simple as, I want to improve my salary, to be there for my family. Now that's really meaningful for a lot of people. But the want could also be something like, I want to get get my law degree because I'm so sick of watching our environment be disturbed and polluted. It could be something as simple as we talked about. There's this really great anecdote that I have, a really great story and I'll never forget it. It was at American University and it was a student. And when she realized what her conflict was, what her want was, is when she adopted a child. She couldn't have kids, so she adopted a child and loved that child. And as that child grew up, she realized that there were some learning challenges. And I can't remember exactly what it was. Was it a form of autism? But it was something that, she saw as a big barrier for her child's success. So she started reading all that she could. She read about it. And as she was reading about it, her aha moment was, oh my God, I love this. Like, I don't want to just be here. I mean, obviously I'm doing this for my kid, but I want this to be an impact that I can make in a broader way. So she went and became an interventionist inside of special education classrooms to help students. But she's sitting there and she's realizing, wow, these school systems are underfunded. What are they going to do? And that's when she saw our Raise the Hand campaign that I mentioned earlier. And she went and got a policy degree because she realized, oh, wow, I have to create resources for individual classrooms that are really suffering. And so for her, her conflict was very personable and meaningful. And if you can connect your branding, your marketing to speak to that emotionally by anticipating those things and that conflict, the conflict was, I want to make a better experience in this classroom for these students. It can be as simple as that. It can be as big as trying to overthrow a dragon, beat a competitor. The storytelling is scalable and accessible and human. And I think that's really important for what I would teach a lot of my teams to really try and wrestle with and understand.
So let's talk about higher education. What have higher education institutions traditionally done, and what have you done that's different with the hero's journey? And maybe you can give me an example how that completely changed the trajectory of, let's say, one particular institution.
Yeah. So higher education is going through massive change and disruption. Well, maybe disruption's a little bit of an aggressive term, but universities are going under. Traditional OPMs, which are online program managers, who would work with universities and scale enrollments and take a part of the tuition, and they're incredibly profitable. They're all struggling from a cost of acquisition perspective and an enrollment growth perspective. There's so much competition. And so that's sort of the moment, especially with online master's degree programs. And then you have the enrollment cliff on the undergraduate side. And just in general, you have people saying, I don't know if I believe in the education that you're feeding me anymore. And so historically, what people did is they relied on the brand, right? If you're running marketing for online master's degree programs, and you are NGIT, or let me give you another, like Duke or UNC, you could get by. You were Duke, you were UNC. You didn't have to work as hard, I don't think. But it's changing now, and so there's two kind of modes of thinking too when you approach enrollment marketing. There's that traditional undergrad side, and then there's the online master's degree side. And what's really interesting, and online master's degree, by the way, Darshan, huge revenue sources for universities, huge, especially for a lot of schools. So historically, that was a revenue play and still is today. Traditional undergrad is different. And to me, it's the classic debate, brand marketing versus direct response. That's how it traditionally was. A lot of undergrads, I don't see too many historically running a ton of Google ads, direct response. It was commercials, it was athletics, it was brand development, it was billboards, it was a lot of that out of home advertising, linear TV, radio. And it's still, I would say, is, but it needs to change. And then your online master's degree was Google ads, Facebook, direct response. And what happened was that you had this brilliant storytelling overall university on the undergraduate side. And on this side, you had great direct response that would get great customer acquisition, get great enrollments. But, well, that's changed because it's much more difficult, especially on the online degree side, to scale enrollments, to scale sales. And so you have to now think about doing something different because cost of acquisition is going up, enrollments are going down, and people are starting to stop caring about education as much as they used to. And I think this is a really important piece. There's so much competition. So the only way, and Darshan, there's like all these images, and I have some videos on my LinkedIn profile. Thumbs up, I'm a professional. I have been successful. I have made it. Or students saying, yay, university campus. Some of that might work. Like, what are they selling? What is this story? What's the emotional connection? It's not going to win anymore. And on the undergraduate side, they need to be more direct response. There's so many ways, but they also have to separate. They have to convince. There's more competition. There's more of a drop. So, there's a real paradigm shift. And You need to be thinking about different channels like organic social. There's just so much that universities need to rethink to win in today's market.
You talk about emotion, and I'm curious. I talked about my book. A lot of people these days are no longer buying products and services; they're buying experiences. So, in terms of higher ed, I'm curious how many people are really going for higher education because to get a job, to learn, or is it actually more about the experience now that they're going to have in total?
If you ask people in surveys, they're going to say a job, right? And upskilling is so important in today's world. There's really great companies like Ziplines Education. They're upskilling a workforce with really great, certs that are, industry aligned. And there's other really good ones too. So upskilling and getting a job and economic mobility, 100% still valuable. But it's like that famous Henry Ford quote, I believe it was Henry Ford. If you asked my consumers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And, when you do storytelling and when you think like a great brand who, like an Apple or, obviously, Apple marketing is way up here, incredible, the best in the world. And then, it's just different. But if you take those principles and you sell 1,000 songs in your pocket, and you connect emotionally with individuals, they're not going to say that. They're not going to say, "Oh, I really felt confident moving forward in my life because I had so much fear of AI changing the world and I was going to be left behind and I wouldn't be." They're not going to, sometimes they might, but overwhelmingly, I don't think they're going to communicate the emotional reasoning. Uh, so I think it's something you have to test with really sophisticated digital marketing strategies to figure out what is actually resonating and not listening only to what people say. So that's my thoughts on that.
I think the storytelling it can be applied to many, many businesses and industries. So I'm curious, if you were to take the same things you're doing in higher education, let's say you're going to apply it to a restaurant, just keep it simple. What would you do and how would you do it?
Our company used to, not my current one, but we used to have a stake in a brewery, and we all lived in San Diego. And one of the things that I think we all were very scared about was just how absolutely saturated the San Diego beer community is. I mean, it's crazy. And this was 10 years ago, I believe. And, they weren't you had brewers like Ballast Point and Stone that were just dominating the market. People were buying breweries for $1 billion. So much money flooding, so much competition. I mean, it felt like there's a brewery on every corner, and every single person was selling an IPA. Yeah, IPA, 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 all the same, all the same. Oh, this IPA is good, or that, blah. And the beer heads would come around and, talk about it and say, this brewery is great, this brewery is great. But what I often felt was the only way to win in this community was to help someone identify, with that brand. And what I think is really important is when you're thinking about restaurants, when you're thinking about other industries, you have to go deep into the founders, the stakeholders. What makes them unique? What made this brewery unique was that they were brewers, but they literally were shipbuilders at one of the biggest shipbuilder companies in the world. Like they literally, during the day, not themselves, but they're architecting, they're managing it, but they came up from that hardworking shipbuilding community. And, I think the story there, and we never really told it well, and the brewery was bought by someone else and, it became a part of the endless changes in the beer community world. But that ability to kind of create a story about how everyone's building their boat, from the hardworking perspective, like what's your boat? And it kind of reminds me of the Modelo, commercials, like you're a fighter, and then telling those stories as you grow. I mean, you see that Modelo is one of the biggest beers in the world. And you see that artist who was doing street art and he made it because he was a fighter, and Modelo is for the fighters. That's a story, but you're putting that consumer at it. Now, getting people to show up to your brewery, it is about identifying. So to me, it applies to anywhere, and it starts with really deeply understanding your founders and key stakeholders and your brand to figure out what's unique, and then deeply understanding your target audience.
One of the things I talk about often is people are willing to pay you for one of three things. And that is if you can save them time, money, or make it easier, they're willing to pay you money. And I'd argue if you can do all three, then your chance of being successful is 3x. But there's a fourth element, and you've touched upon that, and that's if you can evoke an emotion, now we're talking about a whole different ballgame, right? It could be 6x, 10x, 12x, I don't know. It really depends on the level of emotion and storytelling. And you mentioned about the 1,000 songs in your pocket. And I thought that was a great moment when he was able to convey a key benefit instantly and visually that we could all identify with, right? Because before that, it was a pain taking our CDs and all these things music-wise. But, you think 1,000 songs, well, that's bigger than my entire library of music right now, right? So how much importance is evoking an emotion?
To be a nerd here for a second, even though everyone probably thinks I'm a nerd after this call, and I'm proud to be a nerd. You go to Daniel Kahneman and you think about thinking fast and thinking slow. And he talks about those two systems of thinking and how we make decisions. And a Nobel Prize winner, literally talks about that we make decisions often not based on logic, but based on that other system of thinking that's emotion. And we don't realize how much we are driven by emotion in unconscious behaviors. And so, what I really love about that book too is he's like, the system one thinking is great for certain times. And you got to work at it. You got to sit down and really think it through and, be able to develop those principles of logical thinking. But there's also something really important about the emotional decision making. I sometimes feel like people look at that book and they're like, emotional decision is bad. No, there's really important times in your life where emotional decision is important. You don't often know why you're making a decision, but you know what it feels like. And that might guide you more than logic. Same with love, right? I married my wife not for logical reasons. I met her at 19 and was emotionally connected, obviously. And, you stay with someone for many reasons for, 20 years that we've been together, but, it starts with emotion. It's so important to our decision making and our relationships. And I think it's really a blend. Like emotions are very important, but so is logic. It's like Star Trek. You had what is it, Captain Kirk? I'm forgetting about it. And you had Spock, and then you had his doctor. And from a character development standpoint, you had the really logical person guiding them. You had the really emotional person guiding them. And that to me, it's both. It's both.
I recently gave a presentation and talk on how 95% of our decisions are made by our subconscious. And I've often noticed a lot of times people in business don't really buy that premise, but it is very true. Because we are complex creatures. And humans, whether you're, let's say, emotional or not personally, you factor in so many things so quickly from, voice tone, pace, all these things that are processed so much and part of our psyche and our decision making. So you're right. A lot of times people make decisions based on, hey, that's just what my gut told me, right? If that's not more than emotional, it would. But you're right. It's a matter of striking that balance. And, there's always not one answer that fits all decisions. But emotions do play a very big role. And that's why it's important if you can tap into that, that can make a big difference. For example, I recently started a restaurant in Thailand. And the two things I told the team is you're here for two reasons. One, to delight the customers. And two, evoke an emotion with every dish. Because if you can evoke an emotion with a dish, chances are you're going to be doing two things. What are those two things you'll do if I can evoke an emotion? You take a bite and you say, wow. You're more likely to do two things. You're more likely to come back, and you're very likely to share it. And that's the ultimate hope, right?
Yeah. No, I really agree. I mean, I'm a huge Pixar fan. I think the storytelling of Pixar and the book Creativity Inc. is just incredible. And hearing you talk really reminds me of Ratatouille, right? I mean, if you've seen Ratatouille, the moment where that really curmudgeon critic sit down and he takes a bite of the Ratatouille and has his own aha moment, right? Oh my God, this reminds me of being young. This reminds me of being with my family. This is that emotional connection. I mean, creating those moments for your clients is the holy grail.
Well, I think Pixar is quite interesting because it actually appeals to children, right? Because of the animation. But in the end, most adults enjoy the story, right? It appeals to both.
It's the best storytelling in the world, in my opinion. Star Wars rivals it, but Pixar from connecting to people emotionally, getting a grown man to cry, like, like I don't know. I can't think of better storytelling in the world where they consistently win with stories. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter
to
if
get
it's
you to cry, they're tapping into an emotion for sure.
yeah,
So,
it's like Studio Ghibli. I mean, they're doing it as well. I mean, there's just so many fantastic examples of if you've ever watched Chef's Table. I mean, you see that in Chef's Table with the food like you're describing. I love how you described it with the food in the restaurant. That's a really good example.
so where do you see yourself in the future focusing on, and where do you see future aha moments for you regarding storytelling or anything related to that?
That's a great question, and I'm tempted to not say what I'm going to say because people might think I'm a little wacky. But I believe that one of the biggest schisms in online education is social and community. And I went to Stetson University, and that's where I met my wife. And I was from Massachusetts, never left home, and that community being there, being outside the classrooms. I mean, that was everything, and in my MFA in graduate school, like hanging out with my friend J. David Gonzalez and, all these other folks and talking about writing and getting to know each other was so meaningful. Online education, yeah, it's kind of lame, honestly, with the community stuff. Like they try. In undergrad, they have a really cool app called Zemi that I think does its best attempt to do that. But where I really think this happening is VR, AR, spatial computing. It's just gonna absolutely dissolve that boundary, and we will be connected in ways that we could never imagine. And when you start to think about that happening and the opportunities from storytelling that exist and the power of education and there's a really great company called Topia is already thinking about this. It's so exciting. And I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what the journey will be, but I think about that all the time. And I'd love to be an advisor for universities to figure out how to get there. I mean, Ready Player One is a great dystopian version of this. Yeah, experience and the way we're going with AI and VR and AR and spatial computing. I was surprised the Apple headset didn't take on as much as I thought it would, but I think it's inevitable. And just this room, it's going to be completely different in 5 years in my mind with what I see digitally and how you and I interact. And it's very exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. Have you played with the Vision Pro?
I have not yet. I haven't got, have you?
Yeah, I have one. I've been playing with it, and it's the reality is just amazing. The picture quality and stuff. And I think it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of pricing coming down. But I think what you're going to be able to do with it, with the videos and being like feeling you're present there and actually learning, it's going to be huge for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Darshan, I think a lot about, I had this program that I went to with Stanford's engineering program. It was an online CERT program, entrepreneurship and innovation. What I loved about it is like, as I was cooking food for my family, I could listen, I could participate, I could watch videos. And, there's that Apple commercial where literally there's someone cooking and they're like education needs to fit into our world more. It needs to be tangible and present in a way that makes education not feel distant. And, yeah, I really think we're closer than ever before to integrating more and more education to tutors are walking live. I mean, I know we're probably wrapping up soon, but back in the day, people used to come home and they didn't have TV, they didn't have radio, they read. They didn't read because it was forced on them. They read for leisure. They read for pleasure. They learned for pleasure. Have we forgotten about that? Maybe.
Well, it's interesting. You just made me think of this. When you're using the Vision Pro, there's a particular video on a high wire walker. And what's interesting is that, you're sitting in your chair just watching this, but you're totally immersed in it with your mind, the sound, and the visual, right? And you actually feel like you're there in Norway on the high cliff with the person.
Wow. It feels very real.
I mean, yeah, you feel like you're there because you can look up, down, all around, and you can see, all of that. And, even when the person slips and falls, you feel it. You're there. Yeah, and that's what I think is going to be transformative with education because, ultimately, one of the best educators is experience. And so if you can get people to experience something, that level of education and understanding is much deeper. I mean, a perfect example. How many times did your mom tell you, hey, don't touch the stove, don't touch the stove? And I guarantee you touched it once, right? And then you learn, right? So people don't learn by saying, hey, Joe, do this, do that. They actually learn by actually experiencing learning. And that's where I think the visual, the audio, and all this could be very transformative and actually expediting the learning experience much faster remotely.
100%. And you're seeing it today with healthcare, and how, people are learning how to actually perform surgery and medical procedures and evaluate. I mean, there's a school called St. Augustine. I forget the exact name of it. I'm blanking on it, but they literally have VR as a part of their curriculum. So it's happening. But it needs to go faster, and it's going to go faster. One last thought is think about AI, and you think about the virtual worlds. I mean, what I'm really looking forward to is just how expansive these virtual worlds can be. AI will just probably create it for you. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Minecraft. Just that world is it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So if you could have lunch or dinner with anyone in your industry, who would it be and why?
Clayton Dean, he's my brother-in-law. I just love hanging out with him, and it'd be fun to sit down with him, and he's family first.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate you sharing your insights on storytelling and the power of storytelling. And it was great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.